Bandwidth provided by Recursive Squirrel Interactive. Transcription services provided by transcribeme.com. Episode 534, Bob's Beauty Box. For Monday, March 4th, 2019, it's time for this week's edition of the BeanCast, a weekly discussion about the news and issues facing marketers today. I'm your host, Bob Norp. Thanks for joining us. Marketers have always been a skeptical bunch, but a recent study seems to suggest abnormally low confidence among top marketers regarding the near future. Is this simply mass paranoia, or are we on the brink of tough times? Tonight we'll discuss. Also, new insights about consumers and voice, big retail subscription challenges, why there still isn't an ad-free version of Facebook, plus this week's Ad Fail 5. That's the lineup. Let's meet tonight's panel. Thanks for joining us for this week's BeanCast. I'm Bob Norp, and with me on the panel for this evening, we start with the Chief Engagement and Brand Officer of EHE Health, Ms. Joy Altamari. Joy, welcome back.
Thank you so much for having me. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you for coming back to the show. Now, next up, we have the Global Manager of Social and Influencer Communications at IBM, Ms. Brandy Boatner. Hi, Brandy.
Hey, Bob. How are you?
I'm well. And finally, we welcome back the founder and principal of Scott Monty Strategies. Mr. Scott Monty joins us. Hi, Scott.
Bob, I feel like a thorn between two roses tonight.
That's the way I like to put it. Well, let's jump right in. The first topic, an AMA Fuqua Deloitte joint study has found confidence among top U.S. marketers is at a 7-year low. Now, of course, we always take surveys like this with a healthy dose of skepticism, but the general consensus is that the economy is on the brink of a large and potentially lengthy downturn. So, Brandy, what are your thoughts on the market outlook? What are your takes after reading this study, after seeing the reports of it? Do you feel marketer confidence is shrinking at this point, and what does it mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very interesting. I would say, err on the side of caution looking at whenever a study, there will always be a study, measuring something. So I don't take it as, it's very reputable, obviously, but I don't take it as a sign of, doom and gloom or what's going to happen. I'm on the other side. It's funny when you ask this question, I thought right now is a really good time, an exciting time to be a marketer, despite the findings in the study. I feel with just everything that's going on, I had read once a quote that says, consumers are like markets. When, the market is uncertain, the consumer is uncertain. So when various external factors happen, consumers feel a certain type of way, marketers feel a certain type of way. But I think the possibilities and opportunities among the challenges that are currently going on, I think 2019 is a great time to be a marketer. So when I see a 7-year low, I'm like, wow, that says a lot. But again, I'm on the opposite side. I think the time is right.
So what's driving the negativity? Anybody want to venture a guess? Scott, what are your thoughts? Do you think that this is just a whole blown out of proportion situation and that marketers are actually more confident than we give them credit for?
Well, I think it goes down to perception. I think, like Brandy just stated, now is just an amazing time to be involved in any kind of marketing or communication medium, particularly digitally, which basically everything is these days. But if you look a little deeper at the study, they say that some of the lack of confidence that's coming from these marketers right now is because there was only a 5% increase in budget year over year, and that is causing them a little angst. I've seen a lot of stories of shrinking marketing budgets or marketing budgets that frankly aren't growing as briskly as they once were. And that means marketers need to understand how to do better with less. At the same time, I think you're seeing more rigor around analytics, or at least CMOs looking for more rigor around analytics. So the pressure's on to ensure that you are talking about performance marketing, that you're actually tracking results and showing that you've actually created some kind of noise with, well, more than noise, you've created results with the noise that you've made. And I think that those combination of things may be making people a little nervous, despite the fact that it's such a great time to be a marketer.
Well, let's not breeze over the fact that the shrinking marketing budgets or the slowing growth rate in marketing budgets. This is more closer to the truth.
Yeah.
I mean, that's an indicator of some kind of trepidation within the financial portions of the business, and they have the better track on what's happening within the larger market. So, I mean, you got to imagine that from a forecasting standpoint, if the company itself is pulling back and saying we need to shore up and be ready for a downturn, that's got to trickle down into all the departments throughout the organization. So this could be completely out of the marketer's hands. This could be, we could have all the confidence in the world. We could be as excited as possible, Brandy. But, when it comes down to it, if the financial portion of the company is feeling less confident, they're going to influence the market more than the marketers are going to do, aren't they?
Oh, I mean, of course, internal budget, that definitely says a lot. But going back to Scott's point about perception, sure, those are just factors, to your point, that the marketer can't control. That doesn't necessarily mean it's doom and gloom. It might mean, okay, we have to operate in a different environment, as with any company, as with anything would have to do, whether you're a marketer or you're in legal or finance. So I think with the perception to say, oh, now the budget is shrinking, oh my gosh, my confidence in marketing, or like I said, is it an opportunity that says, well, if this is the reality of what's happening, I need a new mindset, I need a new skill set, I need to be very much so data driven, and I need to be able to mix the skills with data and the brand and what I do, or how do I bring, some new level of expertise to what I'm doing despite budget constraints.
I think Brandy, you're completely right. I think that I think Scott touched on it a little bit too. I think that the shift, first of all, marketers are used to having their budgets cut. So shrinking budgets isn't new to any CMO. We're usually the first department to look at budgets when there's issues. But I think the attribution and the correlation between triggers and activities and the effect that it has on revenue is what marketers have to be more conscious of. No longer can you be a CMO only focused on building a great brand, but every effort that you have and every dollar that you spend has to in some way drive revenue. And so when we're looking at budgets and we're looking at investment, marketers have to be not only data driven, but data first. It has to be the first place you go when you're talking about how you're spending the money, where you're allocating it. I think Brandy's right. You have to look at demand differently. And typically, I think maybe decades ago, demand wasn't thought of as a marketing discipline, but it very much is what marketing does. So I think that the study is, probably doom and gloom, but it's probably not right. I think the study should be more about how CMOs have to diversify their teams and how CMOs are thinking about less than bringing awareness to the company from a branding perspective and more about driving acquisition and retention to drive, end of the day, more revenue for the company.
Something that strikes me from listening to you all talk about the way that marketers need to be more data-driven and they need to be more performance-driven, and they can't sit on their laurels. They can't expect to do the same. They have to do the same or better with less money. I mean, all of that is actually happening within the organization. This same study found that most of the organizations they talk to, top marketers, feel very confident in their data performance. For the first time, they feel like they have control of it. And I think that's what you're keying into in terms of the positivity going on in the marketplace right now. There is a lot to be positive about right now within the marketplace because we have, data marketers who finally understand their data tools, finally have the control, finally feel like they're getting a handle on it. But that doesn't take away from the fact that, what was the number? It was like close to 50% of top marketers feel like this is going downhill and that we have to really shore up and get ready for something. And that concerns me. And I don't want to breeze over it. And I don't want to whitewash it with a lot of talk about the fact that if we just do more performance, we'll get through it. Because sometimes performance marketing is going to fail if your marketplace as a whole is on a downward turn. So how do we prepare for that? I mean, or do we prepare for it? Is it just about boisterous, blustery marketing and just going forward and saying, we're going to get through this. We just have to keep marketing and keep doing what we're doing. Or do we have to do something else? I mean, Scott, your opinions on that?
Well, that's an easy one. Well, look, marketers, regardless of boom or bust cycles, need to show up and need to lead by example. And I don't think it's right for anyone to just kind of throw their hands up in the air and say, well, I'm dead before I'm even out of the gate here. I think we need to kind of go back, redouble our efforts, decide, well, if it is that we're asked to be doing more with less, then how are we actually going to accomplish that? Where are we going to prioritize our spend? One of the points in the study is that there was some disappointment in performance of social media over the last few years. And given the way marketers have treated social media as simply another place to simply advertise, I'm not surprised. Back when I was at Ford, we took it seriously in terms of an engagement platform. And I think consumers now are looking for more of that engagement. So if it means putting more dollars into community management and to manning your customer service channels with humans in addition to bots or over-indexing on humans, if you will, because that's what's going to create more loyalty and drive sales, then we need to do that. But this isn't the time to be kind of standing on tradition and simply doing the same thing over again with less budget.
Something that the study did not touch upon, but it struck me as being an obvious undertone, is how much is marketing confidence being driven by this, mass depression that we're seeing throughout the U.S. right now over the current U.S. political malaise. I mean, Brandy, what's your sense of that? I mean, not to get too political. I don't want to
get too political.
No, we don't want to get into a political conversation. Although that seems to be the activity du jour these days. But what it comes down to is we are locked in constant political turmoil at this point, and it's bringing about a mass depression within the population. I mean, you talk to everybody, and everybody's especially in major metropolitan areas, you see a lot of disgust and a lot of depression. And is that affecting marketers' outlooks in any way?
I mean, I'm just and just to, like you said, Bob, not take it too political, I'll just use the government shutdown as just an example. I mean, that was a very real, very unfortunate, talk about disgust. Everyone that I talked to, regardless of where you sit politically, it was just bad on both sides. And that affected a lot of people. Regardless if you worked for the government or an entity or an organization that had government funding, it affected a lot of people. So if you say like marketer, sure, a marketer by day is a marketer, that's your job, but you're a consumer as well. There are things that you do outside of your job. So how would that not affect? How did again, there were a lot of people were affected by the government shutdown. So how was that said marketer not affected? By what happened. Of course, I'm not going to say that goes in the doom and gloom of your day to day, but it certainly probably sparks the question for the marketer. Wow, this is the environment we're currently operating. The marketplace is changing. Consumers are changing what they purchase, who they trust,
and it's global, and it's a global situation going on. I mean, you've got Brexit on the verge of maybe happening with a no deal at this point. You've got trade sanctions and tariffs being put in place. You've got tariffs against the European Union. I mean, it's just like there's so many things going on that are bad for business. It seems like this is a pretty practical reality that marketers have to face and say, look, this is not going to get better anytime soon. We need to hunker down for at least another couple of years and see where this ends up. You know, we can't spend willy-nilly. We need to be more judicious about where we're spending our money over the short term, because things are not necessarily going to continue on this positive upward track. I mean, we're in the longest run upward track in the stock market that we've had for years, and that can't continue forever, can it?
Definitely not. And growth for any marketer or CMO, driving growth is always the challenge. It's always something that you strive to do. And like you said, we have to be more, it's not even, I wouldn't say strategic. We have to be more efficient with every single dollar we spend, and every single dollar we put towards a campaign. It has to be efficient. That dollar's got to be worth it. It can't be, to your point about willy-nilly spending, and saying, well, we tried, it didn't work, but it cost that much money. No, it needs to be efficient. Just again, given external factors that you might not be able to change or impact. Driving growth is always going to be a challenge, but like some people say, change and comfort can't coexist. So something's going to have to change on the marketer's side, whether it's the mindset, whether it's the shift, whether it's what you're preparing for. I'm not going to say like, all right, hunker down, we're all going to, run out and get your bread and water and your canned goods because we're going to be in for a real long time. But
well, we might have to run out and get our bottled water and canned goods if the snow keeps up, but we'll see whether or not that's going to happen here in New York. Well, I'm going to move on and talk next about a certain study that made the rounds. The news was filled with stories about an Adobe report that showed up this past week, which had, among other findings, that consumers with smart speakers vastly preferred ads on the device over ads on every other form of advertising. Now, my first question about this, Scott, is how do you parse this finding, and how should advertisers respond? Your take on it.
Well, I think it's clearly an indicator that we all need to be spending more time thinking about voice and audio in general. We've seen a big rise in the last year of podcasting. We've seen Spotify purchase Gimlet and really cement their move into podcasting. Audio is as much, if not more, a part of our lives than it has been in the past. And I think the notion that people are more responsive to ads or more willing to engage in some kind of brand level engagement on their Echo devices or their Google Home devices makes perfect sense, because they're already talking to these devices every day. And like it or not, you are developing a relationship. I see our kids asking Alexa with good manners, saying please and thank you and things like that. And my 5-year-old just revels in getting Alexa to tell her knock knock jokes every day. So in some uncanny way, there is a relationship that's being established. And I think from one voice to another, even though it's disembodied, there's some sort of humanity behind it, even though it is driven by AI, that perhaps is making us more willing to listen to what these devices have to say.
What's interesting to me, and tell me if I'm wrong, Joy, about this, but when I hear this study and I hear that that consumers prefer to hear ads on voice speaker over any other type of advertising that they see, over banner ads, over TV commercials, they prefer this. How different is that insight from the fact that consumers are very accepting of radio ads as well? And this is just an extension of the acceptance that we give to audio advertising that we don't give to other forms of advertising.
Well, I think we have to go back to the point that consumers don't like to feel like there's disruption happening in their steady flow of gathering information. So I think that the study is hitting on the fact that people are more inclined to react and to be positive toward information that's given to them it could be an ad, but information that's given to them in a natural contextual environment. So as they're listening and they're interacting with this piece of technology, yes, it's much more interesting and it's less intrusive for them to get information that way. Same with radio. I think radio has always been successful because they've been the first to do interstitial types of advertising, right? They contextually, you're listening to a show, a DJ's talking about X, Y, and Z, and then you get information that is served up to you. Yes, it's an ad, but it's contextually relevant. So it seems less intrusive. I think that nothing new, there's nothing new under the sun. And so this is taking in a concept that was very successful at a time when radio was a new technology, and it's applying it into this format that it can be received and accepted today. So I think as you think about consumers and how they behave and how they want to absorb information, you have to be contextually relevant to resonate with them. And consumers are changing and growing, but they still want things to feel personalized and personalized for it to be relevant to them.
Brandy, what's your take on all this? I mean, in terms of the response that advertisers should make to a study such as this, do you think everybody needs to be jumping into voice? Is this the time, or is this just more indicative of a future trend that we should be preparing for? What's your take?
So I think it's more on, I do think it's a future trend that we should be preparing for, just given, I think we're still in a very much so the novelty and vanity phase of voice. I know some people make jokes like, I wish I had a voice controlled shower, or I wish, I could have, voice control load the dishwasher, or, various things that we could tell voice to do. And so, oh, my life would be so great if, voice said, oh, your pants are almost ready, Bob. You're wearing those tonight for dinner. I mean, I think that we're still very much novelty. I think that, in both your professional workplace, in your car, vehicle, what have you, voice will increasingly become important, but there's still, you have to perfect your search when it comes to voice. So there's still some SEM and SEO implications around voice that I think marketers need to focus a little bit more, because I do feel that we're in the novelty phase.
Yeah, we've talked about that on the show a number of times, the search factor, because the optimization has become not just getting above the fold, but being the choice.
Correct.
When you're talking about a voice search, a voice-only search that doesn't give you any kind of screen results, because there are some results that, some devices that have screens. But if you're just talking to a speaker, you need to be the number one choice, or you're invisible and that consumer will never see you. And that's a massive concern for anybody trying to get involved with the voice in the voice arena with their marketing program, right?
That is correct. And so that's why I think, we're still, until we can have the really cool novelty vanity, but then also the utility behind voice marketing, like I said, with SEM and SEO, then I think it's something we should be looking forward to 2019, 2020, so we can start having those conversations. So I think voices, I think it's cool. I think the study, oh, that's great, yay. But I do think we're still in the very early vanity phases of voice marketing. Yeah.
Scott, there's an interesting subtext in this report, and it's the fact that consumers in general are more interested in voice itself rather than the speaker devices, and preferred voice on their mobile devices over every other option. I mean, first of all, we all know that Siri is not up to par with what we're getting from our Alexa or we're getting from our Google Home. It still lags behind, but that doesn't mean that on other devices, on Android devices, you're not getting access to a very powerful AI that you can speak to and actually get useful results out of. And I'm wondering, how does this insight affect overall marketing strategy or voice strategy that we put in play? Should we be looking at trying to bolster the screen-based mobile devices as opposed to the smart home speakers? What's your thoughts?
Well, no, I don't think it's one versus the other. It's we need to be doing both, and we need to be doing everything, which may in turn go back to that hopelessness that marketers are feeling that we got out of that first conversation point. This is yet another platform another area that we have to be concerned about, and it's got its own unique challenges. I know Brandy mentioned SEO and SEM, and I think that's spot on. It also gets to the need for strong branding. And when you ask Alexa for batteries, Alexa's going to default to the Amazon store brand of batteries, not to Energizer or Duracell, for example. So there's some expertise that needs to go into that as well. So it's almost creating a sense of schizophrenia for marketers, where suddenly with voice, now you have to have all your bases covered in every single aspect, and you need to do it well. And the challenge is that because it's so easy for people, because it's so simple to ask your Google Home or your Alexa device for something, we need to get there a lot faster than we had to with other types of technology.
And Joy, what are your thoughts in terms of how this impacts marketing strategy? Because it's just like Scott makes a good point. We have to be doing everything at the same time. We have to be trying to get involved with all of voice, not just part of voice. But the reality is, marketing budgets being what they are, you're not going to be able to do everything. So how do you prioritize, and how do you move into this space in a reasonable fashion that takes advantage of what the consumer wants without leaving behind what the brand needs?
Yeah, I think all marketers, all smart marketers, first start with, who am I trying to talk to? And voice doesn't make sense for every company, every brand, every marketing budget. So I think the very first thing you have to do is make sure that you understand what value voice brings to your business by looking at how your consumer navigates, what's their user journey to your product. And if it doesn't make sense, you shouldn't be having it in the equation. But if it does, you really have to we talked about this in the first part of the conversation and the first question, that you really use data to help drive your investment. I think when Brandy spoke to the novelty of voice. I think when people see something new and they think it's the panacea or the solution to every issue they have, and they invest heavily in it without understanding how to really leverage it for their business, they make mistakes. So marketers always have to be smart about understanding this new technology, how it can enhance their business by really understanding their segmentation and the journey that their users take to consider and then eventually convert to their product.
Brandy, I'm going to leave it back to you. One last thought. I mean, from a standpoint of a company trying to get involved with voice, how would you encourage them to begin this journey? I mean, what do they need to do? I mean, you may not be the expert on this subject.
I was just about to say, because I do not sell direct to consumer, business to business, so voice looks a little bit different on my spectrum.
But that's important for us to realize. I mean, from a standpoint of B2B voice is going to be just as important as consumer voice. And how do you make that foray into a B2B spectrum and get some results out of it?
Yeah, I think Joy touched on it, right? You have to really understand, what's the strategy? What's the objective we're trying to accomplish, right? What are we trying to deliver of value with voice? Then you look at, well, how do I go about doing that? With deep AI capabilities, with, whichever brand, how do you stay true to your brand and what you deliver? By now adding voice to, or having a, voice-based product. It's all going to, kind of revolve around and go back to the strategy. Do you understand your consumers? Are you giving them what they want? How are you delivering voice? Like she said, it can't just be, oh, it's new, here it is, go do it, without really thinking through, how it's executed, the brand implications, the brand strategy, the reputation of the brand. So again, just as we look at the newness or the novelty factor, just to really understand all implications, give like a nice 360 view of what voice can do for you and your brand and your customers.
Right. Navigate the novelty phase with a great deal of intensive looking at what you're doing and managing the process. And because you're going to need to be involved with this somewhere along the line. It may not be today, but every marketer should be taking a very serious look at this, is what we're saying. So,
correct.
Well, let's move on to the next topic. While subscription retail has been hot now for some years, traditional retail continues to stumble on their own efforts to capitalize on the trend. Gap Kids shuttered their service after 14 months. Express and Ann Taylor continue to struggle with their services. And now JCPenney has closed their joint project with subscription service Bombfell, which is a clothing subscription service for men. So, Joy, considering that subscriptions continue to be so successful for digital retailers, why are physical retailers wrestling with so many roadblocks? I mean, I understand, physical retailers may not be as adept at digital marketing as, say, their digital native competitors, but it seems like we're hitting all kinds of roadblocks on something that should be successful.
Bob, I love this question. I think that the answer's in the question a little bit. I mean, the fact that you've said traditional brands, traditional advertisers are hitting roadblocks and understanding how to leverage subscription-based business is probably the root of the issue. I'm a big fan of subscription services. For my daughter, I do Rockets of Awesome, which is like a clothing company that has understood how to manage the type of clothing my daughter would love at each stage and her growth spurts. It really has created a product that A, is convenient for me, and B does the thinking for me. So understanding how she grows. JCPenney offered a subscription-based business, and it didn't do, from my perspective, any of that research. It didn't think about how to customize their product. First of all, I didn't even think about it seems like they just went, again, we just talked about this. They found a new technology, or they found a new shiny object that they wanted to offer, and they didn't really do the research or really do the deep digging of understanding how does that business work. And do they have an audience that would love that business? So let's just look at kind of what we know about it. They wanted customers to sign up for their men's subscription service. We know that if we look at fashion apparel subscription-based businesses, Trunk Club out of Chicago is the only one that was for men. The rest are mostly for women or for children. So that in itself is narrowing the field of success. And then they wanted them to pay $20 for a styling fee, which is in the subscription-based business. I don't know how many people use it. I use it often. You don't really pay like an additive styling fee, right? It's embedded in the overall either annual fee, which is really low, or it's like a $2 charge. So the fact that they're looking at JCPenney male customers and they want to charge them an extra $20 for styling fee, I don't know if that as a customer, if I were a JCPenney customer, I would think that that's of value. And then they're going to charge them, yes, it's free shipping and free returns, but then they're going to charge them a very strict monthly charge for the items that they don't return, which if anyone else is doing subscription-based business, they know that there's a little bit more leniency with it. So subscription-based businesses make it easy, convenient, and they take the thinking out. And I don't think JCPenney understood that that's part of what they would have to offer. But let's look at a bigger picture. JCPenney's, along with two other retailers, closed 300 stores they reported closing 200 stores this year. They will be closing 200 stores this year. So there's a bigger issue, I think, where they're trying to re-energize the brand by picking shiny objects, but not really looking at what the root cause of the issue is with their current brick and mortar stores. They have a product issue. They have an image issue. They have a service issue. Investing in a subscription-based service isn't going to solve that. So yeah, I mean, there's so much we can talk about here.
I was going to say, I love this question.
Yeah.
I'm with Joy, and maybe this is not like a ladies versus gentlemen topic, but I am 100% with Joy. And Bob, I would challenge the question. Let's look at the subscriptions that are successful. So two that are, I feel, extremely successful. One I use as a consumer, and not to do any shameless plug, but the Walmart Beauty Box subscription is extremely successful. And for me, and not to, I love Walmart, but for me, for $5 every 4 times a year, so they do them seasonally, winter, spring, summer, and fall, I get a beauty box full of very much, beauty products that I use as like an everyday woman. Sure, I live in New York, and you can say, well, I do have the occasional, $20, $50 face cream, or, my Dior lipstick or what have you. But, for my face wash, for various things that are part of just my regular beauty routine, paying $5 and getting it seasonally from Walmart is like a dream come true. I'm like, oh my goodness, thank you so, so much. Not having a Walmart where I can go to locally here in New York. Also, I look forward to my beauty box. And again, $5 to get what an everyday woman would need to use in her beauty routine is wonderful. And just to Joy's point, I think the reason that the other retailers have failed, where the Targets and the Walmarts have succeeded, is that you're just not giving your customers what they want, or you've just missed the mark with the customers you think you want them to subscribe to. But again, they're not getting any value out of it.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think if you're looking at the business model of subscription-based business, Brandy's hitting on it. It's a surprise and delight every quarter that you get this product, right? Or get this box. The same with FabFitFun, the same with Birchbox. All of these businesses have figured out that people want something convenient and mindless and inexpensive, right? So that they can be introduced to new brands. If you're talking about apparel subscription-based businesses, Stitch Fit, Rockets of Awesome, you have to take the thinking out of it and not charge the consumer. I don't think JCPenney realized that.
Yeah.
You're all making really great points. From the standpoint of making it easier for consumers, it's easy to cast stones and say they should be making it more easy for consumers, but the early entrants into this field managed to disrupt and get as many customers as they could. And now that it's flattening out and we've got more competition in the subscription space, you've got the cost per customer, the cost per acquisition going through the roof. And how do you manage those two competing forces and still be successful anymore? It seems like subscriptions is a great idea for a lot of consumers, but it doesn't seem to have the mass appeal that a big retailer like JCPenney would need. I mean, I'm belying that point with the story of Walmart still ringing in my ears, but
sorry.
Yeah, but
it's really great, Bob. I'll get you one if you want.
Well, that's okay. Thank you,
Bob. Here's the difference between considering how Walmart approaches it and JCPenney approaches it. Well, first of all, Walmart was a client of mine for a number of years, so I'm particularly well informed as to their digital strategy, and they did it by acquisition. They acquired Jet.com, they acquired Moose Jaw. They created a kind of a satellite of digital culture around themselves because they knew they couldn't build it from within. And they've learned from those digitally native companies that they brought in. And the other thing with Walmart that I think they've done right, or that let me just say that they have to their advantage, which is the versatility of product offerings. With JCPenney, do you need something delivered to you regularly from JCPenney? Amazon and Walmart, they've got everything you can possibly imagine.
Let me back up here for a second, because we haven't really presented the JCPenney option in its full glory the way it was supposed to be, because it wasn't just a men's subscription service. It was for big and tall. And being a tall man, I know how difficult it is to find my inseam. It's really, really hard to find it in a general retail environment. And if someone is going to send it via a box, that should be a winning strategy. And yet it wasn't. And, I think that even though they were criticized for not doing a service for females because most of their customers are women, it made sense to me that they went after this strategy. It's just that they didn't follow through on it in a convenient enough way. And I think the bigger concern for me is something that you said, Scott, which is, you said this when you posted about this on Flipboard. You said it's just like JCPenney has a subscription service. I mean, it's just like nobody knew. I had no idea this existed. They didn't get the word out. How much of that's the problem, isn't it?
That is a problem. I mean, is JCPenney that relevant to most people anymore anyway? B, are they really known for their big and tall lines? and see,
Exactly.
are there big and tall customers actually looking for this kind of subscription service?
Apparently they're not. Bob wasn't. So
And I would say,
they're
and I
not.
would say, and D, any person who's big and tall, I speak as a 5'11" woman, knows that I'm not going to order online my essentials every day. So I would argue that did JCPenney really you talk about acquisitions and acquiring the experts, but they really didn't have a great product manager on the tech side to help them understand, is this even a viable product that they should offer consumers? Because anyone who's big and tall likes to try on the clothes before they buy them.
Absolutely.
Speaking as a 5'11" woman.
I'll speak on the big side. Yeah, you should see me looking for a bathing suit. So that's not happening in a subscription-based service. Just saying.
Well, fair enough.
Well,
Fair enough.
here's something though. If JCPenney offered an integrated end-to-end experience where, as a big and tall person, you could go into a store, you could have a custom fitting, you could know exactly what your sizes are, and then you move into a subscription model.
Perfect.
That's different. That's what Joy was saying before.
Yeah.
If you
That's
remove that
perfect.
thinking out of that, would be wonderful. Wonderful.
I could go on this topic for many more minutes. It's definitely interesting, but we got to move on. Last topic, Facebook skeptics like to speculate on why the social giant doesn't offer a subscription service of the site that would give users a choice of an ad-free experience. So this past week, CEO Mark Zuckerberg gave an interview on the site to explain why this is a problematic solution. I have so much to say about this, Scott, but does he make good points, or is his whole argument disingenuous? What's your take on that?
That's a loaded question. Well, look, the headline was Mark Zuckerberg explains why an ad-free Facebook isn't as simple as it sounds. Well, of course it's not easy. You know, it can't be easy to give up all that money that you're getting from the from the advertising side.
But let's back up. It's not this to be giving up money, because they would be replacing it with a subscription service. So they would be getting the money from consumers that didn't want to have ads, and then if the rest of us who didn't want to pay for Facebook will continue to get the ads. So
right, but and here's the thing: they have built the entire ecosystem around an ad-based model. There is no escape hatch. There is no unengineering it at this point, as far as the way he's explaining it, that will allow for dual Facebook. You know, that will allow for one set of consumers to get an ad-free experience and the other set to continue as it is. And that was lack of foresight. You know, they never intended for Facebook to be a subscription model. If the demand gets large enough, if they see enough people saying we want ad-free versions, if people are threatening to leave Facebook and go where, I don't know, maybe to Instagram, in which
I hear MySpace is still hanging around.
That they still own. Listen, if they can figure out how to make it profitable, they will do it. If consumers can pay more than advertisers and make it profitable, then he'll figure out the model. But right now, it's not advantageous for him to figure it out.
Well,
I agree.
That's the question, Joy. Do you think consumers would pay enough to make up for the lost revenue model? Or
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
No, absolutely not. Advertisers will always outspend consumers who want to have the convenience of having no ads.
Yeah,
but again and again we find out from subscription services, like buy the app or get to see ads in your app. Consumers again and again overwhelmingly choose to see the ads. So you're talking about making a small portion of your audience who's loud and obnoxious happy by giving them no ads, and then you continue to make all that, you know, truckloads of money from all the rest of us poor slobs who can't afford or don't want to pay for a subscription.
And if I were Zuckerberg, I wouldn't do that. I would never create two different products that's maintaining two different product teams that's going to eat into my revenue. No, I'm just going to continue to, you know, work with advertisers. This is all like smoke and mirrors. It's not going to happen.
You know, for me, the more insightful comment that he made during that talk was that he pointed out that consumers say they want no ads, but what the real problem is the data. And there's no way for Facebook to shut off the amount of data that they're collecting on you. And that's where the real money is. And that's where the real problem is. Well, you know, the fact is, consumers can say they want an ad-free Facebook, but if they really mean they don't want to be tracked? Well, that's not possible. And that leads me to the bigger concern: is Facebook fatally flawed because of this data collection that they're doing behind the scenes?
Yeah, I think both Facebook and Google are inextricably bound to this industry of surveillance capitalism, that they have built their empires on the data of others. There's no way they can survive without it. And seemingly, there's no way we can survive without them. There was recently, I think it was either Gizmodo or Engadget. I think it was Gizmodo. There was an individual who decided to get off Apple, Facebook,
Oh,
Google.
yeah, I read that. Go ahead.
Yeah, and she didn't do them all at once. She did each one individually, and she said she found Facebook not terribly difficult, but there were consequences. But she found Google impossible to escape from, and that's what surveillance capitalism has gotten us, and what it's gotten them.
Yeah, I mean that story is really really great, especially the story about Google, because you don't think about how many times Google interacts with the rest of the internet, you know? I mean, it's just like every single time you want directions somewhere, you're probably accessing Google Maps. Every time you see a video of any kind, it's probably going to be coming from YouTube. So there's no way to extricate yourself from this. So is there any solution, Brandy? Is there anything that we can do short of just going total Luddite and completely disconnecting from the internet?
I would say that there is a level, and there needs to be on both our part as users and of the Facebooks and the Googles of the world, just data responsibility. We all have just got to be more data aware. I do sometimes when I give talks or speaking engagements, I always like to ask people, where is your data, right? If you have a number of mobile devices between you, I always try to do like, oh, who here in the room is single? Who here is married? Between married couples, how many devices do you have? It could be anywhere from 5 to a dozen. If you have kids, it's more. And then I say, well, where is your data? Is it in the cloud somewhere you can't see it? Does your next door neighbor have it? Is it with your cable? Where is it? Most people don't know. I don't know where it is. I don't know where my data is. Well, is it secure? I'm not sure. Okay, so just when I do the exercise, it's like we have to be very data responsible. I think for the Googles and the Facebooks, it's around transparency, obviously trust that we see here in the age of data, where my data is going. And it's not a law or a privacy right like it is in other parts of the world. So I would just say the solution is for us to just be more data responsible, be very transparent about where your data is, and for us to know where is how is my data being used, really understand the implications and what that means.
And from a marketer standpoint, we need to also be equally ethical in the way that we're treating our data that we're collecting, and not collecting data that we have no business collecting. I mean, that was the big story last week, where all these apps were sending data back to Facebook because they had used the Facebook login. You use that Facebook login when you're signing up for a new app, and suddenly that app is communicating all of your menstrual cycles back to Facebook. What the heck?
Again, not being transparent, because there are apps like the dating apps, of which I am on many, that will tell you that this, your data is not being used. Your Facebook, if you log in with Facebook, this is not being used for XYZ. They are very transparent with me as to how this is happening. Those apps that you're talking about last week, they were not being transparent. So I say you got to be data responsible. Trust and transparency in this age is key.
Well, with that, it's time for the Ad Fail 5. But before we get to that segment of the show, I do want to take this quick opportunity to thank my guests again and allow them to each do a shameless plug, starting with Joy Altamari. You can find her at ehe.health. Tell us, what would you like to promote, Joy?
I would like to, in this day and age, I want everyone to get their preventive health exam. So learn more about that at ehe.health.
Fantastic. And Brandy Boatner, you can find her at ibm.com. That's where she is the head of social and influencer communications, or at least the global manager. I don't know how to parse the titles at IBM. You have no idea what your role is, but tell us, what would you like to
Wow.
promote?
What I would like to promote, in the spirit, I would like to say to both Bob and Scott, Happy Women's History Month for you both. I would like to promote, as we know, this Friday is International Women's Day. I would love for my male colleagues and everyone to be thoughtful in their celebrations around International Women's Day, but then also for Women's History Month, regardless if that's calling your mom to tell her she did a good job with you, to advocating for, gender diversity, to whatever, your choice may be. But just I would like for everyone to celebrate International Women's Day and Women's History Month thoughtfully. And by all means, see what IBM is doing in terms of International Women's Day by going on IBM.com/be equal.
Awesome. That's a great pitch. Thank you very much. And last but not least, we have Scott Monty. You can find him at scottmonty.com. That's the home of everything that he writes and says and does and all the consulting that he's working on. So tell us, what's going on in your world, Scott? What would you like to promote?
Well, Bob, I can't follow Brandy's fine promotion of International Women's Day. And anything I would say would be lame as a result. So do all of that. And thank you for the plug on scottmonty.com. That's plenty.
Okay, you're welcome. And as for me, for more information about me or the show, visit thebeancast.com. There you can find a complete show archive. You can find how to consult with me. And of course, you can find out how to advertise on this program. So check it all out at thebeancast.com. And now it's time for the Ad Fail 5, a rundown of the lowest moments in advertising, marketing, and public relations from the last week. First up, despite last year being a year of Me Too and Time's Up, Brandy, and despite it being International Women's Day coming up here on Friday, the gender pay gap at WPP, the agency network in the UK, actually went up. This was only found out because a new UK law requires them to report this kind of finding. So what do we say about this?
I think that WPP should probably ramp up their International Women's Day efforts in terms of gender diversity now that the rug's been pulled out. Just going, like I said, it's Women's History Month. This is I'm glad that you put this on the Ad Fail 5. Yes, with Me Too and Time's Up, but like you said, gender diversity and gender parity is a very real thing. And at WPP it is. So they can consult with folks who are very good at addressing gender diversity. My own companies like Coke and what have you, maybe their clients, because I'm sure their clients don't like to see this, but I think they should use Women's History Month and International Women's Day as an opportunity to address this so that it doesn't have real reputational damage and risks.
Hey, Bob, I think in fairness to WPP, that's because of the payout to Sir Martin. So
Fair enough.
maybe go back to an even keel this year. We can only hope.
Well, hope that losing that. Of course, they haven't paid him yet. They're still embroiled in legal fees, so I'm not sure how that comes out, but we'll see. Next up, TikTok may be super hot with the kids, Joy, but they may have wanted to pay attention to their COPPA guidelines. That's the Child Online Privacy Protection Act. Because now they're saddled with the largest FTC fine ever. I think it's $5.7 million. When your whole business model is appealing to preteens, you'd think you'd have your COPPA stuff nailed down tight, wouldn't you?
Yeah, you think so, right? I think Brandy hit it earlier when we were talking about transparency and data and privacy. $5.7 million is a lot. And they're going to have a lot of time paying that back, and they're going to have a lot of time to think about making sure that especially when you're dealing with children or teens, that you're on the up and up, that you're not violating any children's privacy laws, because no one's going to be down with that.
Now, next up, the retail apocalypse continues, Scott, with 3 separate retailers. We mentioned this earlier: Gap, JCPenney, and Victoria's Secrets, all announcing a total of 300 stores closing on a single day last week. Big box retail, I don't know what to say, because it's just it's not going anywhere. It needs to evolve, though, and I think that's what the pain is. There's a lot of retailers out there who just aren't ready to evolve.
Yeah. Well, Bob, I'm thinking of starting a subscription model for only $5 a month that'll enter you into the retail apocalypse Deadpool. And we'll be determining how many stores actually close each month, and the closest one wins the pool that month. So just Venmo me the money.
Put me down for 5.
Literally.
Now, next up, Lyft may have a highly anticipated IPO on the horizon, Brandy, but news last week that they lost $911 million last year can't be welcome news for investors. I think the funniest part about this is that the number is exactly 911 in terms of like the amount of money. You know, it's just like dial 911. We're in trouble here. So what do you think this is going to do to the potential IPO for them?
I mean, it definitely it might present some challenges. I think it's funny, the irony of 911. Going back to what Joy said, we didn't do our due diligence here to even, say, hey, so about that 911 million, I just want to let you know, yeah, it happened, but don't worry about it. It's gonna be okay. I don't want you to lose faith in us as a company. I think, wow, Lyft, don't you have to go through a lot of protocols before you take, your company public? And this might, cause some roadblocks. I still think, it'll be a little shaky, but we'll see how it plays out.
Yeah, good points all. And
the good news on that one is if you look at their profit and loss statement over the last 3 years, the profitability has actually been improving each one of those times. So even though they lost 911 million last year, they had a better profitability than they did the year before. I think it was 41% versus some 60-something% the year before. So they're moving in the right direction, even though it's still negative. They're getting closer to zero. So that's a good sign.
Yeah, but they're still $1 billion off the mark, so I'm not sure that's a good sign. And last but not least, YouTube continues to try and stem the latest brand safety crisis. But after shutting down some 400 pedophilia-inspired pages and turning off comments on tens of millions of videos, Joy, advertisers are left to decide whether they have done enough or are just revealing how big the problem is. I'm just like, when you're saying we turned off 400 pedophilia sites, I'm just like, you had 400 pedophilia sites on your network and you didn't know about it?
Why am I getting all the children's questions today? I mean, I know I have a 4-year-old, but I mean, no, I don't know what to say. You turned down 400. How are there 400 on the site? How do you not know that? I mean, as a person with a 4-year-old who watches YouTube constantly, YouTube Kids, I'm appalled. I'm upset. I'm really irritated. It doesn't make me we're taking the app off the iPad tonight. I don't understand how they did not know that they had all those sites and the comments. Like, who's monitoring that? Who's their security officer? I'm not happy.
Yeah, great points. This is just an unfolding mess for them. I've tried to stay away from talking about it on the show because there's so many brand safety issues with YouTube these days. But man, it's just like, it just keeps getting worse. Well, have something to add to this list or just want to discuss it? Comment online. Use the hashtag #AdFail5. That's #AdFail and the number 5. And that does it for this week's show. If you'd like to subscribe to this podcast, visit our website at thebeancast.com and click on the subscribe link. If you're an Apple's podcast listener, we've also provided a direct link to our listing there, or just search for the BeanCast in the podcast directory on the Apple Podcasts app. And whichever podcast directory you use, when you subscribe, please leave us a review. Got a comment? Have a question? We'd love to hear from you. Just send your emails to beancast@gmail.com. Opening theme was performed by Joe Seibel. Closing theme by C. Jax. Thanks for listening. I'm Bob Norp. We'll be back again next week. Hope you'll join us then.
You know what I mean? It's like if it's, you know what I mean? I don't know, man. It's just like, okay, it's like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like totally like that. It's like it's like I don't know, like if it's it's like you know what I mean? Yeah, it's just like kind of it just seems like it's just like almost exactly. It's like exactly.